Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone, and many thanks for taking out your time this afternoon. I would like to thank ETAuto and Nabil and his team for giving me this opportunity. And I would like to thank my team at AutoFacts who have put together this presentation, which will cover over the next, 45 minutes to 50 minutes, and then later on we can have the Q&A. If you look at, I think, the content of my presentation is going to be basically future of mobility, connected cars and Industry 4 Internet of Things, alternate fuel vehicles, where they are heading towards, and conventional fuel challenges, what we have, and the traditional distribution network also. Is it hold good in the future? Because the whole, the traditional distribution, what we know today, if it's going to really hold good or something going to change there. Let me just really jump into the first one, the future of the automotive industry. If you really look at the automotive industry from my lens, I've been seeing quite a lot of changes in the past, but in the past I think the changes were pretty slow. And this is one industry I think is not really changed fast compared to other industries. And I do expect, I think, the automotive industries to go through a transformation change in the next 10 or 15 years. Now, what are some of the big drivers for this change? I think that's where I think we need to just spend some time. In my mind, there are critically four things, the significant drivers or your significant key touch point which are shaping the automotive industry. One, obviously, the ultimate is autonomous driving. We all know, I think, where we are going to head towards that and what's happening in that particular space. When this is going to be reality, whether the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, what will happen? I think some of the questions will go through that and development. And then second one is a connected vehicle, the connected cars. I think slowly what is happening is that I think the vehicle is now seen to be more of a device rather than a mobility instrument, which is a big change once again. And the third thing, the future of mobility, how customers are looking at the mobility per se, in terms of whether they want to own the vehicle or they want to have the alternate mobility. I think obviously that's also going to impact the automotive industry. The fourth one is electrification. What sort of future those will have. I think if you really look at it, I think that there are two key stakeholders who will really decide the changing preference. And of course, you have regulators, and automotive industry is highly regulated in some way. So I think these two key stakeholders will really redefine how the industry is going to evolve. If you look at the slide, I think obviously it depends upon whether the regulatory regime is going to be liberal one or whether it's going to be restrictive. If you have restrictive, then obviously the development is going to be slightly different. If it's going to be more liberal, then obviously I think it's going to be slightly different. Just let's, I think, spend some time on the autonomous vehicle, what's happening around in that area. As I said, if you really look at the customers' changing preference today on the mobility, one, I think obviously people don't want to acquire a driving skill to drive the vehicle. That we are seeing, obviously change in that. Because if you want to drive the car, you need to get the skill. And today, I think the next gen, they really don't want to get that skill. So there's one mental block already there. I think if you really look at people who want to own the driving license, in good old days, in my days, I think we used to all wait to complete the 18-year stage so that we can go and get the driving license. I think today that's falling apart. Even including in developed countries, I have seen, I think the young gen, they don't want to really go and own, and they don't want to really learn this skill now. That's point number one. Point number two, I think obviously the comfort, and people are looking at the comfort in terms of whatever they want to do it with ease and comfort. That's other changing preference. You also look at the market space today. I think just imagine for a scenario. I think if in economy 80% of the people are old, obviously your market base is going to be only 20%, because typically if a person is, let's say, more than 60 years old or 50 years old, maybe I think 60 years old, they obviously don't want to drive because of safety or whatever it may be. So obviously, I think if you look at from the market size perspective, the aging population is also creating a key challenge for automakers in terms of who's going to buy the vehicles tomorrow. I think that's where I think this autonomous vehicle will come as a handy answer. Then look at, once again, I think the more and more women are participating in the economy, and that's going to really increase. And once again, some they really don't want to learn the skill of driving. For them, once again, I think autonomous vehicle is going to be answered. Or physically disabled person. So I think the autonomous vehicle has lots of benefits. If you really see from the benefit lens, in terms of you can increase your market base. Ease is going to be there. Safety is going to be there, in terms of, because if you look at accident today, 90% of the accidents are made because of human error, the driver essentially. If the machine is going to really overtake that, whether that's going to do a better job, yes, I think to a certain extent. But having said, I think you have some challenges on security that I'll talk about. But if you really look at the advantage, the advantages are too many compared to the disadvantages in my mind. The advantage essentially in my mind, I think it just increased the base of the customers. And the challenges is going to be basically 2 or 3 things. One is regulation. The whole regulatory landscape will have to change because most of our regulations were written on the traditional transportation model. That really has to change now. For example, to give if in an autonomous car, if there's going to be an accident, who is responsible? Insurance company will pay whom? So far, I think they're only kind of insuring the drivers because the driver is on seat. I think they make those mistakes. But in autonomous car, what is going to happen? The insurance company probably will have to go and take cover on the auto manufacturers. And the safety is a very important piece. I think that's where a lot more things have to happen before the customer accepts autonomous car as the mobility, mode. Because customer acceptance is also very important. But there is to a certain extent, most of the customers are now looking at the security. What will happen if somebody can hack my car, when I'm driving? I think that's where more and more, innovation has to happen, and more, security feature need to be built in. So the customers will feel very comfortable in terms of, giving their life to someone. Obviously, I think, they don't want to do that. The lastly, I think the cost is also going to be one of the key factors because end of the day, I think if you look at the connectivity so far, whatever we have seen, kind of semi-autonomous autonomous futures or connectivity, it's all coming in the high-end cars, the premium cars. That will have to come in the mass production, for mass production also. There, the cost is going to play a big role. I think what will happen to the cost? If the cost comes down, obviously, I think more and more people are going to, go for this, and obviously there will be market for it. Now, coming back to, I think, before it could happen on autonomous vehicle, there are some challenges apart from regulatory and customer acceptance. Things like, getting the right, detail map, getting the right sensors, having right communication systems. So these are going to be other challenges. Now, how these are going to really develop? Easy. Every automaker will go back and start driving, designing their own map. If that will start happening, is once again your cost will go up. So there will have to be a lot of collaborations. A standard protocol have to be developed. I think these are some of the things which we will see in coming years. But the key question is that whether it's going to come in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, it is going to come in. Obviously, it's not going to be coming in 5 years, though, complete autonomous vehicle. But I think, obviously connectivity will increase. From connectivity, it will obviously go to, autonomous driving. Maybe I think in next you could see, 15 or 20 years out where we probably might see a lot more autonomous vehicle going on the roads. And probably you might start seeing in autonomous vehicle in few areas. Like for example, it could develop very fast in construction because where you have the mobility is pretty much defined. Mining could be possible. These are applications where I think the autonomous vehicle will probably come in because even in the public transport. The key thing for autonomous, apart from this, is also the logic. Because in road many things happen. You need to really build the system logic in such a way that the the system can really analyze the data and take the quick decision. So I think that's going to be important. And and infrastructure is other area. I think in developing economies, when you look at our own roads, it's impossible to make some of the judgment. I think so. We need to really look at that sort of sophistication, whether it really hit in the in a full-blown way. But it is going to come in. And apart from that, some of the key markets also will decide in terms of what will happen in this whole innovations. For example, there are big markets like China. If you really look at China today, almost 24 million to 25 million vehicles have been sold. And by 2020, we're expecting that to go obviously to 30 million vehicles. So some of the regulatory changes which will happen in some of the key economies will also determine the future of the autonomous vehicle. But having said, I think one thing when I really deeply think through, urbanization is going to really, I think if you look at the key risk for Asia specific, urbanization is another key risk. Because we are expecting the urbanizations to go from around 45% to almost 60-65% in next 20 years. So urbanization is going to bring a new challenge for regulators in terms of mobility. Obviously, they are talking about, they will obviously focus more on public transport, but apart from that also they'll need to think through other ways and means what they need to do just to make sure that the city, the city is, people can live in the city. I think otherwise it's going to be very, very difficult. And we are seeing some of the signs in Indian cities already on that. Now, if you let's go on the connected, vehicle. Once again, I think, this is, it's like a semi-step. I think before we could just move to full autonomous vehicle, I think connected vehicle is going to be an answer, in the medium term. And if you look at it in some of the numbers which I have not put in the presentation, today the global automotive industry is, let's say, about $3.5 trillion. And if you just take that extrapolation and then you just see that, in the traditional way where we're going to head towards, we'll probably head towards, let's say, about $5.2 trillion or whatever, maybe looking at the growth, what we have seen. Having said, I think the growth is obviously going to lower a bit in future. Maybe I think we've seen, on a cumulative basis, growth of 3% over last, almost about 25 to 30 years because of, China factor. But that growth is going to, moderate a bit, I think, but still will grow about 2%. If you really look at the revenue stream from the traditional, from $3.5 trillion, so let's say, I think in 2030, we will just move to 5.2 or 5.3 trillion dollars. But because of this whole autonomous, driving and autonomous and connected vehicles and shared mobility, the revenue is obviously going to go up. And I think, various estimates I've seen, I think it might go up, anywhere between 1 trillion to 1.2 trillion in the next 20 years, which is a big number. One can always argue that it is right or wrong, but at the end of the day, I think, if you really look at the potential is pretty significant, from the additional revenue stream coming to automakers from the autonomous vehicle and even the connected cars. And the good news is that I think in both these, vehicles, the connection between the automakers and customer is going to really increase. Today, I think the customer, is not really connected with the automakers so much, but that connectivity is going to really increase. Then, you can really know your customers. You can do much better job in terms of designing the vehicle. And I believe, I think in the future, you might have to have different kinds of vehicle to meet different needs. For example, city driving, intercity driving, within the city driving, and different, customers you have. So I think a lot of changes are going to happen in that space also, because end of the day, it's going to be more and more custom answer for the, customized answer for your customers when you really talk about the vehicle. And so connected vehicle, if you really look at the market size, what we really, expect that to move from 40 billion euros to about 122 billion euros. And especially, I think the growth is going to come on autonomous driving futures, the semi-autonomous driving futures, and safety. These are going to be big drivers in from now to 2021. And if you look at the global drivers, I think I've spoken about quite a few, but let me just talk about the other one. Implementation of eCall in the European Union. Actually, the date for that was 2015, but now it's been moved to 2018. Just imagine if the regulators are now pushing you to connect your vehicle more and more. I think that's once again a driver apart from customers. Increased demand in car or information services, already we have seen that. We've been seeing now. And safety and security I spoke about. And obviously I think things like availability of high-speed wireless network and cloud, that's also going to be important, because unless until you have that, it's extremely difficult to build the connectivity with the vehicle. So I think there is a huge potential, I think, in terms of both on autonomous driving and complete when you see, and when you see the connected car also, I think in the next 5 to 7 years. I think my next slide on the 6, basically autonomous driving and electrifications. If you look at, I think, connectivity is the inflator of, autonomous and electric driving, which is a key there. And autonomous and electric driving are mutually dependent, although research is happening pretty in a different way, but they're mutually, dependent. Earlier, I think we used to say electric driving versus autonomous driving. The roles have changed now. I think if you really think about autonomous driving, you somewhere down the line you think about electric, driving. This is where I think, the electrification of a vehicle is going to increase in coming years. Because I think when you are talking about connected vehicle, we are talking about autonomous driving. I think electrical connectivity, is probably better compared to other traditional. I'll just talk about a bit in other slides. Just a look at, I think, some of the quotes from the CEOs. It comes very clearly. For example, Alan says, because it's clear that I almost view self-driving car as a solved problem. We know exactly what to do, and we will be there in few years. If you look at most of these quotes, I'm not really going to repeat this quote. it's very clear that the future is going to be more on continuous digital companies, digital product, and and one thing, but the digital manufacturing is one, but really I think the digital product is one, but digital manufacturing is slightly different. So that's where I think a lot of innovation will happen in next 5 to 10 years, from in the automotive industry. This is basically the reinvent the wheel. I think the key important thing for any company today, I think when they really decide their strategic direction, is the what capability they really want to harness to make them unique, which is very easier said than done, but very difficult to implement. But that's where it is, because how are you going to make your value proposition pretty unique? And this is they need to make a very hard choice in this whole, in terms of how they want to collaborate, with whom they want to collaborate, what they want to do, which direction they want to take, because you are making the bets now. If you really don't make your bets properly, but the chances of you losing will be very high. So I think this is a very critical juncture for anyone in the automotive industry to make the kind of a strategic direction which is sustainable in the long run. Because I'm just using the word sustainable, because in the past we have seen, I think, the strategic choice which people have made with not much of thoughts on full sustainability. Now I think they're struggling. So that's something that's going to be key. I think the Industry 4, I think this you have already heard about it. I think this is hitting almost all the industries across. See, it all starts with the digitalization and integration of your value chain as a first proposition. Then comes to digitalization of your product and service offering, how you do that. And third thing is new digital business models which are emerging. And fourth, the data analytics. I think data is going to be main flow here. In any industry you see, I think the data is going to play a critical role. I think automotive is not very different. I think which is what we are talking about in all connected vehicles and autonomous driving. And if you look at, this is a new business model on the rise. We all talked about from the 18th century steam engine manufacturing, then went through mass production and assembly lines in Industry 2. Industry 3 starts with automation and robotic. But now Industry 4, it's all about digitalization and integration of value chain and product and services. It's all about Internet of Things and services. That's also going to drive the automotive industry as well. Now I think with all these things, I think obviously emission is becoming an important area of concern. When you talk about regulation, I think regulators are obviously worried about the safety and emission. I'm not really going to talk about there are regulation on local content in some countries. There are regulations on levies, some levies just to increase local content and stuff like that. But nevertheless, I think from the global perspective, if you look at from a global regulation point of view, the safety and security is what the biggest concerns at this point in time. And for emission, and obviously I think a lot of innovations happened in the past, but the pace of the innovation was not so much. But now the pressure is so much. Obviously, I think the automakers and everyone is trying to figure out what is the acceptable alternate fuel mechanism, or how can we build the environment-friendly vehicle. At this point in time, I think obviously we are talking about biodiesel, we are talking about various forms of fuels, and we really don't know which fuel to really lead. More and more electrical vehicles are going to be in the next. Obviously, I think the source of electricity is going to be extremely important, because if the source of electricity is going to be coal, then obviously I think you'll not get the optimal benefit. I think that's not going to be very environment friendly on an overall sense. But having said, let's look at what's happening around on the alternate fuel vehicles. Slide talks about very clearly that apart the existing IC what we have, it's going to go change, and there's going to be hybrid powertrain. And if you look at a different scenario here, you will see the volumes are increasing in almost all different kinds of vehicle, whether it's a full hybrid, whether it's a mild hybrid, whether it's a plug-in hybrid electrical vehicle, all are showing the growth. They continue in terms of more and more innovation will happen, and I think obviously it's on the automakers and everyone, regulators, that I think whatever vehicles are on the roads, they're polluting lot lesser than what they used to be, what they are today. I think that journey is now continued. I think it will continue in future as well. Just a snapshot here. If you look at the alternate powertrain growth, at PwC Autofacts, we expect the growth of almost about 15.5% CAGR. We are talking about by 2022, 8.6 million units running on the alternate powertrains. And if you just look at the region-wise growth, it's pretty much, I think, growth is there everywhere. North America, we are talking about the growth of 446%. Hybrid is also, we're talking about 212%, and overall CAGR, I think 19.8. If you look at European, we're just talking about, once again, good growth. So I think almost all regions are going to go through this journey. I'll talk about in the other slides. I think in some regions, I think the development is very fast, I think in some region not. But end of the day, I think the alternative powertrain is going to be reality in future, because I think their pressure on reducing the environment is so high. And when you really meet your emission target, reduction in emission target going forward, you need to really think about the alternative powertrains. I think there is no answer apart from that. And this requires, basically hybrid requires competencies and components in both ICE and electromobility technologies, both from the load point shifting, electrification, powertrain, and if you just look at the left side, micro hybrid, mild hybrid, full hybrid, and electrical vehicle. I think almost all avenues, I think automakers are going to really look at, and some are going to obviously be answer to the problems what we have on the emission. But there's going to be a lot more innovation happening in this area. And here, if you look at the main part of the hybrid powertrain, what we have will be combined with IC of 4 to 6 cylinder. That you see, I think the average displacement, whether it's European Union or NAFTA or China or Japan, downsizing effect of that, and also global production volume of hybrid engine is also going to grow. And if you look at, I think, the 6 cylinder which I talked about. So end of the day, I think the whole objective is that how can you reduce emission, how can you make the vehicle more, environment-friendly vehicles. I think that's what the answer is going to be in the long run. See, one other thing which is very interesting now in this slide is the conventional alternative powertrain differs in complexity. It's very easy to say that yes, I think we'll move from one to other, but it's not very easy. When you just sit together and start designing. If you look at in conventional powertrains, the complexity increases along with the path of power flow, which is very clear here. In electric, drive trains, the condition turns around as the complexity decreases. So I think that's where when you think about the connected vehicle, or you think about the autonomous driving in the future, what base it will have? It will have the conventional, or it will also have the electrical, and which is going to be more easy, more complex, which is not going to be more complex. So obviously, I think the answer here is that the power flow in electric seems to be less complex compared to in the traditional IC engines. On the region side, I think obviously you look at what's going to happen. More than 13 times of production volumes will be needed in Europe by 2020. In terms of production of battery cells. Although in Asia, I think slightly, there's going to be excess capacity, not very large, but I think Europe will be short, and obviously I think North America is going to be most from Tesla, what we're talking about, in terms of Tesla coming in, and obviously on the electrical vehicle. But innovation is also going to happen in both the conventional IC and hybrid electrical powertrain, because I think there are two things here. One, how can you make your vehicles more fuel efficient? How can you make your vehicles more environment friendly? I think it's all going to really now who's going to win in this whole war? Is conventional IC or hybrid or electrical powertrain? See, I think in conventional IC, obviously I think it's very hard to say that yes, you completely eliminate your emissions. It's not possible. You might probably reduce it, but a lot of investment is required there, and it's going to obviously have impact on the cost. But I think in this electrical also, I think it's not going to be very easy, because there also, once again, the cost of battery, then you're talking about the infrastructure. So which way it's going to go through, it's very difficult to predict at this point in time. It all depends upon, in case of electrical vehicle, how the cost of battery will come down, infrastructure, the charging infrastructure, and how regulators support. Because in the regulators, if they support one or other, I think obviously where they are supporting will take, will obviously increase. If you look at, I think the subsidy which is being given across the globe on electrical vehicle, the demand for electrical vehicle is obviously increasing. So I think the regulators also are going to play a key important role, and apart from regulators, society at large is also going to play a key important role in kind of pushing in particular direction. So let us just see, but you could see development happening in both these places. That's what we've been seeing at this point in time. See, new players. as I said in the beginning, automotive industry has not gone for a big transformation in the last 20 years compared to other industry. Although there is some, but obviously it's not gone through. You might say, I think that, obviously there was a cost pressure. I think there was no much of customer preference, or maybe I think automakers did not push through very hard. You could go back and argue why things have not happened. But if you really look at, there are new players who are coming in. In my view, I think this is just tip of iceberg. I do expect a lot more new players to jump in. Because obviously, innovation doesn't happen at one day, and somebody is going to just own up that. And in this case, I think this is what's happening. This is what we are seeing. Tesla, obviously, I think they are now spearheading the electrical vehicle revolution, and then Google is very interesting. Once again, I think the whole self-driving prototype what they are developing, but Google has made it very clear that they don't want to manufacture a car. So what will be the scenario for them? Either they can use third-party assembly to produce a Google branded vehicle, or they might say self-driving prototype is merely a positioning exercise like Android Auto, or they might sell as a software and get the license fees. Same thing with Apple also. As I said, I think you will see many players are going to jump in, including a couple of startups in this whole space, the way things evolve. So I think traditional automakers also, I think not lagging behind now. They're up there, and I think they are making significant investment in some of these areas, because they know that I think that's going to be your unique value proposition going forward. So if you look at the global emission levels are expected to decrease significantly, until 2025. Already we've seen a significant decrease happen, but it's really going to further decrease, because if you look at the time frame in the next slide, I will just talk about. If you look at the target by country, everywhere I think is showing the dip, because in every country the regulators are now coming on board very, very stringently as to how they can really make automakers to kind of get the fuel economy overall. And the fleet emission limits, if you look at, I think obviously they're going to go down significantly for almost all similar across the globe. So that's clear from 2014 to 2021. There's a big reduction there. And this also once again talks about the level of reduction which is going to happen. From now to 2017, the targets are not very stiff, they're all moderate. But just imagine from 2017 to 2022, we are talking about 95 gram CO2 per kilometer. Big reduction from where we were about 123 in 2014. And fleet average emission level also are dipping. And as I said, from 2001, if I really look at the emission level, they've come down by 33%. And the targets are going to be pretty stiff. So obviously, I think the automakers will have to do a lot more innovations in terms of how they will meet these standards, which are going to be so tough and stringent. See, interestingly, if you really look at it, electrical vehicles should be the main trigger, especially in the small and medium-sized segments, to achieve the emission goals in future. The big car segment is dominated by plug-in hybrid in order to reduce the emission by 40% until 2021. So I do see a lot more innovations happening in just to make sure that the emission target what has been set, the automakers are able to achieve through this alternate fuel mechanism and electrical vehicles. And that journey is going to continue, and we'll see the journey in the next 5-6 years going to become more and more they're a lot more and more faster than what we have seen in the past, because the time from 17 onwards, they have very less time to meet some of these stringent norms. Now, just in terms of conventional powertrains are losing market share. That's something which you keep hearing, but overall volumes are still increasing, because as I said, there is no firm alternative at this point in time to say that, look, I think conventional fuel is going to go away. We heard a lot about different fuels, but obviously there's no one firm answer. Because of that reason, we still expect the gasoline to play a major role. Diesel will be there; it's not going to go away. But if you look at, I think in the right side, the vehicle propulsion, from 2015 to 2022, the gasoline is going to be obviously increasing. Diesel is more of a slight increase you can see, but hybrid is going to increase. Plug-in vehicle is going to increase. Electrical vehicle is going to increase. Although in percentage terms, still they are low. See, this might even change also. It all depends upon how the development is going to happen in the next 3 or 4 years. As I said, it all depends upon the key stakeholders. But on the right hand side, I think on the left hand side, if you really see the assembly by country, Japan is going to lead the way in terms of alternative fuel. Overall, it's going to be increased to 8%, but Japan is going to lead, and after that you have China, Germany, US, France, Mexico. I think almost all bigger markets you see there, including India here. That brings to my, the next one in terms of traditional distribution network, whether they'll really hold or whether they're going to, go away. The big question mark. I think, to my mind, I think when I think through, what's happening around. One, I talked about the vehicle, design itself, where I think the innovation has happened at, slower pace and it's not catching up. Even in terms of distribution, also I think you will see a radical change going forward. I think the traditional models are not going to be, so much effective. So now the time frame is that whether dealers are going to be there, or whether, the way the vehicles have been distributed in the past, they're going to be there. It's a $1 billion question whether they'll be there or they'll not be there. Because if you really look at the cost pressure on automakers, it's very, very significant. And supply chain, if you really look at, I think, the distribution network, it'll add to your cost anywhere between 20 to 25%. So what value addition you're getting through that? How can you reduce the cost? That's where I think the key challenge is that. And today I see a lot of innovation is happening by dealers, not so much automakers, in terms of, because I think they're also not catching up. And if you don't do that, you'll have third players. Already we see, I think, there are a lot of third-party players who are now jumping in the distribution model. They're, becoming a link between a dealer and a customer. And obviously they are cornering some revenue from the dealers. And dealers obviously will not be so happy. So I think these are some of the questions which are really going to, make dealers and automakers to look at in terms of what they need to be doing from the distribution network point of view. In this slide, if you really look at, although it's from 2013 and 2014, but if you really look at, I think, direct conversion to dealer is still high, but internet is really catching up. So obviously, I think the next gen, is they are going to do more and more research through the internet. Before they could, directly have a conversation with the dealers, and we don't know. I think, some in the long run, they might even make the decision and then go to the dealers for buying the vehicles. Now the question is that whether the dealer will be there to sell the vehicle or it will all go to the internet company. That's a $1 million question. It all depends upon how things are going to evolve. But one thing is certain, that I think you need to look at your distribution network and how you can, make that process much more, robust from the customer-centric point of view. That's whatever you do. I think it all has to be customer-centric. And this only, I think, the data is for last 2 years. Still, I think people who are not using is pretty high. But once the internet penetration is going to increase, especially in the developing economy, this is really going to go change. And obviously, I think the automakers will have to do something differently in their entire distribution network. Because, as I said in the beginning, in this whole new model, one thing is coming out very clear is that how can you manage your customer in the life cycle? Today, the touch point, if you really look at, once the person buys a vehicle, through dealers, and they just come for the services, after that there is no connectivity. I think that is not going to really work with the next gen. The next gen, I think they will look for more and more, kind of connectivity directly with the customers, with the customers by OEM. I think this is a good opportunity. I think you can even distinguish yourself through this channel, and you can, also create the brand loyalty, so that is something which is going to be extremely critical going forward. So you might see, I think, some of the traditional distribution model will go for some change. But having said, I think once again regulation plays an important role here, because in some of the market, like in US and all, there is a, you can't directly sell the vehicles. I think there are some laws, I think, obviously, that people have to overcome on that. So regulatory challenges you will have in this space as well. I think just to come through in terms of, the difference which are taking place between physical touch point and the digital touch point. More and more, I think, you need to concentrate on the digital touch point and what you really do, you'll do to attract the customers. And that is going to, change, whether it's awareness, whether it's a consideration to buy the vehicle, and, or service or loyalty expansion, it's going to go through. And a lot of innovation is going to happen through in the digital touch point. How can you be close to your customer through this new, new avenues to communicate and new avenues to, render the services? Because, as I said, I think when you just think about the, autonomous vehicle, and you need to update your software regularly. So obviously that you can't, do in traditional model, it will fail. I think obviously you think through something differently. So you'll obviously you'll have better insight on the customers, and there'll be a lot of value data will come through to OEMs, and they'll be able to really use the data to just make sure how they design the product, and then how you customize to a particular, a particular region. I think that's where a lot of helping hand will come through this data to automakers. Today, I think that is not really happening. It's happening in a very bits and pieces way through surveys and all, but that will go for a change in the future. And the other thing you just look at in terms of how you want to position your brand. I think that's going to be once again key, the brand function. And that once again, whatever you do in the future is all have to be do with the customer, in center of all these things. So whether in terms of orientation, information, or reliance on the brand or lifestyle, brand defining lifestyle, is all going to be both, I think, an opportunity and challenge for automakers going forward. And this really, which I talked about, just not going to be one particular channel. You will have to have customer-centric, multiple channels and multi-uniform networks to kind of, sell your vehicles with, of course, I think strict brand integration. Obviously, you need to think about your brand, how it's, communicating the value proposition to your customers, whether it's a digital or from customer behavior point of view. And then obviously there's going to be the competition is just going to increase in future. As I said, you'll see many players going to come in the industry, and some are not traditional automakers. So obviously, I think how you are going to work on this distribution network is going to be extremely key. A different value proposition going forward. I think if you're really not able to get there, it's very difficult to create the brand and hold the customer, to you, or increase your brand loyalty. That's going to be a challenge for automakers. I think I just covered it. One of the topic which I wanted to do, obviously, for the time, I thought it will be very difficult to go through the global outlook, what we believe in the auto facts in terms of global growth, India growth, and different region, what is happening around, and whether the growth is going to slow down in 2016, 17, and longer term. So all I wanted to just talk about, but that will take definitely about 40 to 45 minutes if I had to really go through each region. That's the reason I just told Nabil and the ETAuto team that we could probably do that webinar, separately for 45 to 5 minutes, in terms of just making sure that we have enough time. So thank you very much, and obviously I look forward to your questions, and if I'm able to answer, I'll be able to answer to you. If you're looking for much more detail in terms of technical aspect, I'll get my auto facts colleagues to kind of help you in that. Thank you very much.
So now we're starting Q&A session. So I am sharing down the questions with you.
I think the first question is coming is, how is the Indian market poised to accept autonomous vehicle? There is a lot of interest in the Indian market. There's no doubt, because as I said, the next gen is going to be very high proportion in India, because we will have more and more end customers. So in my mind, the Indian customer will definitely are interested, because they are used to it and they will expect more on autonomous vehicle. But the key challenges basically will be, as I said, is in terms of the cost, because Indian customers are going to be cost conscious, and I don't expect our per capita income to go from $1,600 or what it may be to $10,000 even by 2050. That means the middle class population will be pretty huge. So cost is going to be one key criteria. The other criteria is going to be infrastructure. Infrastructure is a big challenge in India, and obviously regulators. So interest is there. Now I think the question is that how long it will take to go there. It's extremely difficult to predict, but it's not going to be very in the near term, in my view. It's going to be longer term for countries like India. And this question came from, yeah, thank you. I think the other question come from Gaurav is that, don't you think insurance will be discreet when autonomous vehicle, except for natural damage, nothing will happen? As I said in the beginning itself, this is something, a big regulatory challenge in terms of what will happen if there is an accident. And I think, as I said, things will evolve. One, definitely, I think the number of accidents should come down through autonomous driving, because human errors will not be there. But obviously, if something happens, then the ways and means of it, how you ensure, I think that is going to be, kind of more development. Whether it's going to be customer, obviously not customer, it's going to be automakers. We'll have to just see, I think, how things will happen in that space. But having said, I think the insurance cost also will come down, because if your accident will come down, if your insurance costs should also come down. But a lot of there are a lot of questions around that particular area. I think things will be kind of they will evolve. But yes, I think it's going to be a different mechanism than what we have seen in the past. The other thing which came, if the impact caused by China is so profound, where else are foreign manufacturers looking for assembly of their cars as a backup? See, today if you look at it, I think most of the assembly is happening in China. If you look at, I think, you don't import, most of the automakers have assembly based in China. I think they're manufacturing in China. But, just imagine, I think if there is going to be a lot less restriction than what it is today, then obviously the automakers will look for the location where they will be able to achieve the cost efficiency. Once again, it's not going to develop economies, more developing economies. So I think at this point in time, to me, it looks like, I think China is not going to, go down the path and just, kind of let loose the regulation what they have, because manufacturing is key there, So yes, I think, if there is something going to happen, there are going to be alternate market which will emerge, and then, they will take a lot more share, in terms of manufacturing. But having said, one other trend which, you're seeing there is also that it's now more or less, people accept that it's always better to assemble the vehicle near the market. Because one, I think you can't really predict what will happen to currency, or you can't really predict, what will happen in terms of environment, in terms of, the natural disaster. If something happens, then you lose out the market. So I think obviously it's a fine question one has to really look at in terms of where they want to really put up their plant in terms of manufacturing. But I've seen the big shift there is that if the market is big enough, just go near the customers or near the market, as opposed to just going and manufacturing somewhere else, far from the market. How do you see the obviously, I think the interaction between the conventional cars and autonomous car during the transit trade? I think in my mind what will happen is that obviously you go through from conventional to connected vehicles, from connected vehicles to autonomous car. That journey is going to really continue. I think that's how the the evolution will happen. You see, sometimes it's also a big question, on the road, whether we'll have both the cars. One is autonomous vehicle, other is driven by a human being. It's very hard to imagine. But I think these are some of the answers we are still struggling with how to. But in my mind, I think there will be, obviously today there is interaction happening around, and that will increase, and the increase will lead to obviously the autonomous car, I think, the ultimate one. The next question is basically, for connected vehicles in India, we need to have a particular bandwidth. Will DOT provide that, keeping in mind the cyber threat issues? This from Abhishek, that yes, I think this is, as I said, you need to have the connectivity, otherwise it's going to be extremely difficult. When I talked about the infrastructure, I think infrastructure includes one of these things also. In my mind, I think, some of this we also went through, I think, when, we were just going through, a lot more changes in the information technology. But today you look at, I think, everything is done and dusted on that front. You see, I think in some of these things, obviously the regulators also will, kind of come and look at what they need to do from the infrastructure point of view. This is the answer, this is a question which they will also go through. But, the key thing here is the customers. If customer acceptance is there, I think obviously customer wants that. I think things will fall in place. I don't think so. I think the people will wait for regulators to decide something. It's the other way around. I think you will find a place, and then regulator will obviously have regulation to kind of do that. But I think this is once again, area without infrastructure, it's going to be extremely difficult in terms of how we, do the transition from one to other. And the next question is coming from, do we think more companies will try and sell direct to customer and skip over dealers like Tesla? See, I think this is what I talked about. There will be some amount of innovation happening around. I think if the dealers and automakers don't do that, you will leave that entire place to third party to dominate. I think this is what's happening in India currently. So the question right now is that whether that is going to happen, it's difficult to kind of imagine, but I will not be very surprised if it happens. Because if you just imagine an internet, you are selling a car directly, and then there's a multi-brand, a service station you already have. I think that probably will increase in futures. That's one proposition. The second proposition is basically, I think, in terms of when you talk about your vehicle, a connected vehicle or autonomous, semi-autonomous vehicle, there will be a lot of, obviously complexity in terms of servicing your vehicle. Whether a third-party person on down the road is going to service, the answer is probably no, because today is able to do that. But tomorrow it may not be. I think if you have a unique value proposition or unique kind of a complexity in manufacturing, then you probably will have to have your own kind of avenues to service the customers. So which way it's going to go is going to be very difficult. But yes, I think ultimately one thing is going to be clear, that in the distribution network, a lot of innovations will happen from two angles. One, to reduce the cost, and secondly, just to make sure that you are directly connected to the customers. That is going to clearly happen. Next question comes: does production of biofuel in country like India requires adequate training and development, which will again have a representation on cost? Yes. See, there's no doubt in my mind. I think that's going to be key once again. That's why I said some of these things depend whether there's going to be the innovation is going to be much faster or it's going to be slower. It all depends upon the cost pressure and even the training and development, including the supply chain. What we have today, I think our entire supply chain is not geared up for that. So we need to think through on that also, in terms of how you train the people, develop the people, what do you do on the cost, because that's otherwise you are going to have safety issues. So I think some of these things will get answered through regulations, through regulatory development, and also I think expectation from the customer, increased expectation from the customers. Next question is coming from, I wanted to understand as to how do we see ancillary business shaping up going forward, given the preference for no moving parts, cylinder-free vehicles. Also, how do you see the like Tesla shaping the supercharging infrastructure in countries like India, given that we are set for 1.75 GW target of solar and wind? I won't be surprised if the likes of Tesla set up regional hubs in India and develop the entire ancillary business, just like Suzuki did for the Maruti. I would like to understand the trend in ancillary electronic charging infrastructure and the movement from the current. Okay. See, today I think the supply chain, obviously they are struggling in terms of, they're grappling in terms of what they need to be doing, how they need to really, partner with the OEM just to make sure that I think they will relevant in the value proposition or business chain. One thing is very clear, that I think every ancillary or every component manufacturers need to really look at in terms of what they are doing currently and where changes are going to happen, and whether they will be relevant in the marketplace or they will not be relevant in the marketplace, and what sort of alternate strategy they need to have, and how they can kind of have their value proposition linked to this whole new set of technologies. That's going to be a key question for them. I think you can't just think that I think what you're selling, the components the way you're selling today, it will just continue. If they don't do that, obviously new set of players are going to come in. As you rightly said, I think the Tesla could set up the regional possibilities there, but end of the day, I think the ancillary and the traditional automakers will have to really think through in terms of the value proposition and what changes are happening, and how they are really they are kind of working to make sure that they are there to participate in the new market, as opposed to just being there and just looking for. I think if you look at the rise of some of these traditional the players who are coming, in my mind, I think obviously the innovation which ought to have happened is not really happened at the pace, because it was happening not at the pace. You see a lot of new players came in, and I'll not be surprised. As I said in my presentation, these are only tip of iceberg. You might have another 3 or 4 or 5 people coming down the line, depending upon what happened with the traditional players. If traditional players don't respond, you will have new players coming in. So next question comes in, what would be the future of CNG fuel in India? See, I think the two things are extremely important when you really talk about fuel, because if I look at what happened with diesel in Europe and why diesel became more popular, and obviously I think today we everywhere diesel is going through a bit of trouble, not just not in India, all over the globe. Whichever alternate fuel you have, one thing you need to make sure that is completely environment friendly. You need to look at from all aspects of it. If you look at diesel, I think it was considered to be a fuel efficient and obviously environment friendly, but everything people never looked at particulate matter. They really looked at CO2. In CNG also, I think there are a mixed bag. I keep seeing it. There is no firm view that yes, I think CNG is answered. Okay, CNG is better than diesel, but end of the day, I think whether CNG is going to really take off, I think to my mind that all once again depend upon the firm ability to say that yes, I think it's much better from all the corner, and then the cost of it and the infrastructure. I think the cost and infrastructure is going to be extremely critical there. And if the government is going to give some sort of incentive for move from one to other, that's going to really help. So I think if these 3-4 things fall in place, I think there'll be future for that. Otherwise, once again, you might see very limited kind of success of CNG what we have seen so far. Do you foresee sales dealers going out and vehicles delivered through workshop? See, in terms of, I think I don't expect, at least in near future, the dealers will go away with the traditional model. I said in some of the countries you also have laws on that. But I think it all depends upon, I think, as I said, the critical thing in my mind is that what sort of innovations I think the dealers and automakers are going to do just to make sure that they are able to respond to the changing customer preference. And they don't allow third person to come through. If they allow third person to come through, and if they are not able to really, meet the changing customer preference, I'm afraid I think the traditional model is going to go, in a big trouble. So what I have seen is that now a lot more things are happening at dealers front, and hopefully I think the development happens through, maybe I think they'll be, control of their own destiny. Otherwise, it's very difficult to think through what might happen. And today, if you look at, that many third players are jumping into, distribution network, and they're, making more margin, or they're making decent margin, and that margin hit is going to, that margin is hitting the dealers, and even, ultimately it'll come back to the automakers. Can you please give a brief view of how does 17 look for autonomous industry in India on the backdrop of various changes that are taking place? Okay, I think in terms of, if you look at the automotive industry, I'm slightly optimistic this year. Let me just tell you, I think a couple of things what is going in my mind at this point in time when you really think about the economy and the growth and stuff like that. We all know that the economic growth is good compared to any other regions, and then obviously the bright spot and stuff like that you all read. So one, I think on positive side, if you really look at it, inflation is still low. I think food inflation is slightly there, but it's fine. Interest rates are coming down, and then obviously there is a lot of investment happening in the rural economy and infrastructure through the budgetary allocations. In addition to that, we all are expecting the good monsoon. To my mind, I think the only the biggest worry I have is that the monsoon. If we have a good monsoon, I'm pretty confident that we are going to hit the growth in almost all the segments. If not, then we will obviously we will have challenges. And also in my mind, I think the diesel vehicle ban and all, there has to be some certainty in that. I think that's also going to, if the certainty will not come through quickly, that's also going to impact negatively. So I think let's hope that I think we have good monsoon, and we'll also overcome this regulatory challenges, especially in diesel vehicle in Delhi and other areas. Okay. Then one more question again. We need some guidelines of future of three wheel vehicles in India. Either we have to switch over gasoline engine or diesel engine. See, I think basically, as I said, at this point in time, unless until there's a major technology breakthrough happen in diesel, and they're able to convince that diesel is very good, comparatively, and it's not going to be so bad from particulate matter. I think there's going to be a question mark on the diesel all the time. So I think obviously the switch on gasoline or diesel engine, I think that decision has to be taken based on what developments are taking place. In my mind, I think diesel is coming under a bit of pressure everywhere. I think that's something which you need to keep in mind and look at. I think how you need to have alternative. Otherwise, if you don't have the alternate business plan, it's very difficult for you to just make the change in the last minute. What is your intelligence on two-wheeler electrical vehicle trend in India going forward in the next 5 to 10 years? I'm slightly bullish in this. I'm expecting. I think once again, I just want to. The way my mind thinks is that I think I will see a lot more support of the regulators on electrical vehicle going forward. See, incentive what you're offering today is not very significant, to push a guy to go for an electrical vehicle. One, I think there has to be, I expect with all this emission happening around and all sorts of pollutions and stuff like that, especially in the bigger cities, there will be a lot more support from the government. That's one. Number two, today's customers are far more, educated, aware on the environment issues compared to the old generation. So this trend, in my mind, I think, is going to drive more and more electrical vehicles on the road. And of course, I think we need to also have the charging station, the infrastructure. So hopefully, I think compared to the four-wheel, on electrical in India in the near future, I tend to bet on the two-wheelers more. I don't think there are any other questions which are there on the dashboard for me. I think a couple of more questions have come through. Maybe there's time I can take. What do you see service aggregator disturbing the service industry? This is coming from Uday Kumar. See, this aggregator obviously I think is going on rise. The whole business model to me I think is going to be sustainable in the long run. Right now I think the only challenge which I see for them is one is I think they need to get their pricing right, and they also need to just overcome the regulatory challenges which are there. But from the customer point of view, I think obviously there is proposition, value proposition. Now coming back to I think I keep saying whether it's going to really decrease demand for vehicle in the future or not. In my mind, I think yes, I think it's going to decrease the demand for the vehicle, but at the same time, I think there's going to be an increase in demand because I think this whole cab aggregator is going to use the vehicle much more than what traditionally I think person use, and they will replace the vehicle quite faster. And just imagine a country like in India where I think just whatever 20 people owning car in 1,000, so you'll see cab aggregators are going to offer the mobility to more and more number of people across the country. So the demand for vehicle will go up in the short term to medium term. Maybe I think in the long term it will start decreasing, but definitely I think that's something which is going to continue. What is the strategy for diesel vehicle ban in India getting increased, and how it will affect the customers and automakers? See, I think this is very important for regulators also. I think end of the day what happens, otherwise there will be knee-jerk reaction what we are seeing here. Obviously I think in my mind I'm hopeful that the ban will be kind of in some form or other form. I think with increased taxes might be taken over. But I think the key thing here is that it's extremely important to have a sustainable. Otherwise, it's going to be extremely difficult for automakers to think about making huge investment. I think that's where I think in my mind that's going to really impact in the automakers and customers also. So at least from whatever we learn out of the diesel, this does not happen in India also. It's happening elsewhere as well in European countries. Hopefully, I think I do see going forward, the way regulators are kind of want to implement the regulation, much more kind of they are coming in they're giving enough time. I know that by 2020 we need to move to next level. It's a very short time. But at least I think it's now clear that from regulators' point of view also they'll make sure that I think whatever they do, I think they give enough time for automakers to adjust to that. This is what happens elsewhere, but in India also probably we might see going forward more happening that. In my mind, it's very important to have the regulation which is sustainable, which people can see in advance what they need to do, and it becomes very easy for automakers as well as customers to adjust to that. I think hopefully we'll move in that regime in future. The next question is coming through is what is the manufacturing potential in India for next 5 years for electric vehicle? So I think in my mind, as I said, I'm more bullish on two-wheelers compared to cars because, as I said, there are 3 or 4 important things whether we really move on to electrical vehicle, the demand for electrical vehicle. Maybe I think in some form, I think the electrical vehicle demand might go up, but obviously the base will not be significant unless until we, work on 3 or 4 things. One, I talked about the cost. How can we bring down the cost of battery, and how can we make the vehicle affordable, and what sort of incentive the government will give, the infrastructure, and the customer acceptance also. I think we need to educate customers also in terms of, because customers have many different perception about the electrical vehicle. So if you are able to overcome all of these things in next 5 years, but I don't expect the volumes to go so significantly because to put all this in place you need to have clear roadmap. I'm not able to really see a very clear roadmap at this point in time, and although FAME and all have come through the policy, but it might probably happen in two-wheelers in next 5 years. to certain extent, to lower extent in the four wheels, in the cars and all. But I think in 20 and 20 beyond, maybe I think we might see some more traction happening in the vehicles. But electrical vehicles will increase on roads. There's no doubt. I think some of these things will fall in place, but probably it will take more time in India compared to other countries because still we are very far behind on infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Abdul, for taking this webinar session on global megatrends in the automotive industry. Unfortunately, we won't be able to take all the questions due to time constraints. Attendees can send us their questions at editor@etauto.com. It was really an engaging and insightful talk, and we hope all the participants enjoyed the session. The recording of this webinar will be made available on etauto.com by tomorrow. Thank you everyone for joining this webinar. Signing off.